All right, let me get rid of these slides. How do I do it? So this is chapter 8. Do you know that I was talking for like 15 minutes to myself? Because I realized my camera wasn't on, and I'm just like, da-da-da-da-da-da. No, because I had my mic off and my camera off. No, it's just like I feel like an idiot because I'm like going through the slides. And then all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, where am I on here? And I'm like, I'm not on there. Okay. And then I realized that my mic wasn't on either. Right. All right, so let me start over. Okay, so these are legal drugs, and I'm going to try to go quickly because I'm worried that we're not going to get through everything. So legal drugs, alcohol, nicotine, and psychotherapeutic drugs, which you have to get through a prescription, and herbal supplements. I'm going to talk more about herbal supplements, but I want you to know that herbal supplements are things that you can get at GNC. They're classified as a food, not as a drug. They behave like drugs. So you guys have seen Hoodia and everything? You know what that drug is? You can take it and it'll make your appetite go down or whatever. That is, well, it's a drug that you can get at GNC. There are some of these drugs, and they're more like herbal supplements, but they're actually really drugs. And so it's not something that you'd want to take because it actually causes depression. It makes people very nervous. It's not a drug. Like if it looks like a drug and acts like a drug, then it's a drug. The key issue with herbal supplements is that they're not tested at all, yet we have free access to them. So you have to be very, very careful when you go to a place like GNC. In fact, when I had a surgery, a doctor recommended, and this was under medical supervision, told me before the surgery to start taking something to reduce inflammation. It was a drug that they sell at GNC. But it's a drug because it operates like a drug, right? It gets rid of inflammation. So even though you can get certain drugs from GNC as herbal supplements, that doesn't mean that you should take them and that they're not dangerous. And there's a lot of dangerous effects of herbal supplements, but I'm going to talk more about them. Let's not focus on that. I'm just going to skip because we need to just keep going. So don't worry. So let's talk about psychotherapeutic drugs. Psychotherapeutic drugs are designed to make people's lives more easy. All of these drugs are were once legal drugs that were used for psychological reasons. And we're going to talk about barbiturates, benzos, amphetamines. I'm not going to talk a lot about ecstasy and LSD, but these all were considered psychotherapeutic drugs. All of the above drugs had therapeutic uses at one point in time, but all psychotherapeutic drugs, most of them are actually abused, except for some. Most of these drugs are actually abused, which is kind of interesting, isn't it? These psychotherapeutic prescribed drugs. A quick thing that I wanted to note is that if you're using legal drugs, you're not necessarily doing illegal drugs, but if you're using illegal drugs, chances are you're a big consumer of legal drugs. People who use illicit drugs are the people who are smoking and drinking as well. Does this make sense? Big consumers of illicit drugs are always using the legal ones too. So here I just have like 69% of heavy drinkers also used marijuana in the past month. Of those not using alcohol, only 2.4% reported monthly marijuana use. So if you're an heavy alcohol user, you're 100 times more likely to have used cocaine in the past month. That makes sense, right? So there's a fine line between people who use heavy legal and illicit drugs. It's called this drug-taking lifestyle, basically. So people who use drugs tend to use everything else. So people who tend to use some drugs tend to use a lot of them. So it's a drug-taking lifestyle. 12 to 17-year-old smokers are 10 times more likely to have used marijuana in the past 30 days. People who are 12 to 17-year-old cocaine users, smokers are 38 times more likely to use cocaine than someone who doesn't. There's a lot of overlap. legal drugs account for as many as 5 times as many premature deaths as illegal drugs. So we know that legal drugs are a big problem, including psychotherapeutic drugs. Let's not go there. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about alcohol first. That's a legal drug. Interestingly, we have a long history. Alcohol is the oldest recreational drug on the planet. It has been around since prehistoric times. Did you know that? Because alcohol is created by fermenting fruit, so fruit overheats, and they think that animals were eating it and that humans were eating alcohol, just picking it up off the ground and eating it and getting slightly intoxicated. So we know that alcohol has been used for centuries because all societies have rules about alcohol use. And that shows us that most societies, except for Eskimos for some reason, have rules about using alcohol. So we know that it dates back a really long time. So they believe that during the Stone Age that a form of beer was actually made back then. Do you believe those cave people? So, and we know that up until modern times, alcohol was considered an essential part of the individual's diet. Remember we talked about it? And in prehistoric Rome, alcohol intoxication was viewed as a religious experience. So, fermentation is a process. It's a chemical process, and that's how alcohol is made. And basically fermentation, if you crush certain kinds of fruit and allow it to stand, alcohol will sometimes appear. And what happens is these microorganisms called yeast settle onto the crushed fruit and begin digesting the sugars through this process of fermentation. So the yeast breaks down the carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen for food, and in the process it makes alcohol as a waste. But it can only do that up until alcohol concentrations reach about 15%, and then it becomes toxic to the yeast and the fermentation stops. So the highest alcohol concentration that can be made through fermentation is 15%. If you want anything bigger than that, you must do what's called distillation, and that's when you boil the wine, and then the steam, which contains higher concentrations of alcohol, is allowed to cool down and collected. This has been being done for centuries, and it gets rid of all the nutrients. So it's pretty much alcohol has very, very poor, nutritional value. I just made a list here. You can refer to it later, just showing you kind of the percentages of alcohol contained in these different types of liquor, so you can see. Fortified wine, I think like Mad Dog 2020 is like a fortified wine. And that is when you mix distilled wine with fermented wine. That's just a type of wine that has stronger. Malt, you mean in this list? I know what they're talking about. Okay, I'm going to go forget that. Alcohol flush is, have you ever seen people who drink and they get really, really super red? It's more common among Asian people. This is called alcohol flush, and what alcohol flush is it's like a genetic mutation where the liver doesn't break down alcohol in the same way that other people's liver does. So it results in flush symptoms, heart palpitations, dizziness, and nausea. It's mainly found in Asian people. Between 47 and 85% of people of Asian descent get it. Between 3 and 29% of people of European descent will get it. And this is one reason why people think that Asian populations don't have such big drinking problems as other groups, because of this genetic mutation. It's a genetic thing. That's why. Now, it's predominantly found in, you're more likely to find it in Asian descent people, but it's found in other groups too, and it's because of just the way that the liver in Asian people breaks down alcohol, they can't break it down the same way. Okay. Do I want to talk about this? Let's see. Just see something. Okay. So just a little social policy on drugs. I mean, not drugs, alcohol. And I'm going to review some social policy with you about the drinking age. But after the Volstead Act was repealed, right, prohibition, they needed, we talked about this, taxes. So depression happened, and they felt like if they taxed people, they could get more money to help with the budgets and stuff. But the drinking age actually was, in 1933, was actually 21. In the 70s, they lowered it because of the draft. So it's kind of interesting that it was 21 in 1933, and then in the 70s it was lowered because of the draft. People argue that if people could go to war, right, that they should be allowed to drink, and that's how they got the drinking age down to 18. What happened again was in the 80s, in 1984, they passed the Uniform Drinking Act. This was with Reagan. What happened was Reagan commissioned reports on the fatalities of young people, and remember he was very into alcohol and prevention, and he wanted to raise the drinking age to 21 because he wanted to decrease alcohol-related fatalities. So what ended up happening was he withheld federal funding from states that did not increase the minimum drinking age to 21. Now the minimum drinking age is 21. When were you 18, though? What age was that, Derek? I mean, what year? How old are you right now? Oh, yeah, I don't know what they're doing in the military. I can imagine, but where were you? Were you getting served here, or were you in a different country? Oh. South Carolina, I mean, I don't know how much they enforce that stuff at all. The South tends to be more liberal. That's so funny that you were born in 1988. Because in 1986, I was in college at Tulane University in New Orleans, and that was one of the states that would not increase their drinking age because they relied so much on alcohol sales and people coming in and drinking, and you know what New Orleans is like. And so when I got there, I was excited because I was 18 and the drinking age was still 18. All my friends went to college in all these other states, and we had a drinking age of 18. They finally raised the drinking age, I think when I was probably after my sophomore year, but they grandfathered us in to drink. So we were always allowed to drink because we were grandfathered in, you know, at 18, so the new people who came in couldn't drink, but we could. Anyway, here's my question. Do you think, well, one of the goals of the Uniform Drinking Act was they felt that people would drink later in life. What's really interesting about it is, what do you think happened? Do you think this lowered the age? Do you know what the age of initiation is? That's the age when people start drinking. So when the drinking age is increased to 21, do you think that people started drinking earlier or later? Now, when the drinking age was 18, most people started drinking at 18. But when they raised the drinking age to 21, most people started drinking at 16. So people argue what this did was, instead of actually preventing people from drinking at an early age, it actually lowered the age at which people start. Why it did that, I don't know. Maybe in your mind, if the drinking age is 18, you're willing to wait because it's like a reasonable time. Or if it, you know, at 21, you're like, well, it's all the way over there. I might as well start drinking at 18 or at 16. Do you know what I'm saying? So the key issue with the Uniform Drinking Act is that it had the unintended negative consequence of maybe pushing the drinking age, the age of initiation to 16 as opposed to people just starting at 18. So people start earlier. Now, I mean, we can't say 100% that it was the Uniform Drinking Act that caused people to start drinking at 16, but it did coincide with the Uniform Drinking Act. So that's one of the unintended negative consequences of the Uniform Drinking Act. The other issue that's considered, so youth drinking is still high regardless, and now it starts much lower age than it did, starting at 16. The other thing is that people feel that now everyone goes out and gets fake IDs so they can drink. And the fact that people are going out and getting fake IDs is sending the message that we really don't respect the law. And if you were just drinking at 18, you wouldn't need the fake ID and people would just wait. So people feel like, oh, this is going to lead to the general erosion of respect for laws. People don't really think it's important. They don't respect the drinking age. They're probably not going to respect the marijuana laws. It's kind of like, it just like starts setting the stage, and they say, well, a lot of people feel that people should be able to drink at 18 and that we're being kind of overly harsh. Joan, where are you from? So everybody get what I'm talking about with the fake ID and the general erosion of respect for laws? Are you following that? Okay, good. Oh, interesting. Don't worry about that one. Okay, blood alcohol concentration levels. This is what we call the BAL or the BAC. Blood alcohol level, it's the same term for both. And it's the volume of blood that is made up of alcohol once alcohol is ingested. Okay? So, once I drink alcohol, what percentage of my blood is filled with alcohol? Here's my question for you. Why is it that a man of the same weight can drink as much alcohol as a woman? I mean, more alcohol than a woman of the same weight. So if a man weighs 125 pounds and a woman weighs 125 pounds, why is it that a man can drink more alcohol than the woman? Question. Derek is correct. Women have more fat. So if I'm a 125-pound woman and I'm a 125-pound man, the woman is going to have a higher percentage of body fat, because the body composition of a woman contains more fat. It's related to our hormones. So when you are ingesting alcohol, it will absorb into the muscle and it'll go to the blood, right? So it'll go into the muscle and then it'll go to the blood. If a woman has less muscle for it to go to, that of the same weight, then it's going to go into her blood. Does that make sense? And get her more drunk. So that's one issue why women have more. Another factor so sex of the drinker is going to impact alcohol's effects. Another thing that's going to impact alcohol's effects besides body composition, so I would write that there, body composition, is because the woman has more body fat, is also the, what do you call that? Hormones. Males produce an enzyme related to testosterone which breaks down alcohol. So testosterone itself has an enzyme in it that breaks down alcohol. So that is why women of the same weight can drink less. Other factors that are going to affect whether or not alcohol is going to get you really, really super drunk is your size, right? So the heavier you are, right, the more you can drink. What's in your stomach? If you have Taco Bell in your stomach before you drink, you notice the difference. But then if you have a martini, it's going to be like on an empty stomach. So what's in your stomach? Because remember we talked about that. It slows it down. How quickly you're drinking. The faster you drink, the more drunk you're going to get. Carbonated, for what's in your stomach, did you know that carbonation increases the effects of alcohol? Did you guys know that? Yeah. Speed up the rate through which alcohol is absorbed in the small intestines. Carbonation. So let's just look. So these are factors. Okay, I'm not going to look at that. Yeah, okay, so we're good. So let's just look. This is a chart, and it basically tells you like how much a person weighs and how many drinks they have and like how drunk they'll be. Now this is just an approximation because remember this is somebody's weight, but it's not accounting for their body composition, right? I could weigh 100 pounds and be solid muscle, which is going to be different than if I was 100 pounds and very, very heavy, right? But it's an approximation. If you have about 2 drinks in an hour and you're 100 pounds, you're going to be about just under the legal drinking, the legal BAL for California. Now, if I'm a 220-pound guy, I can have 4 drinks and be under. But if I have about 5, I'm going to be at the BAL. So in the state of California, the BAL is 0.08. Okay? I just want you to know that in other states, it is not 0.08. It is 0.1 in some states. If you go to southern states, it's 0.1. The reason why it is not consistent, Bill Clinton wanted to make it consistent across the United States, but he was met with resistance. Who do you think would resist the creating of the uniform BAL? Now, if I'm at 0.08, that means that I can drink less and drive, right? But if I'm at 0.1, I can be more intoxicated and drive. The South beer companies, which are located in the South, southern states you can drink more and drive. But let's look at what it looks like when you have a 0.1. Well, first of all, here's some of the effects of alcohol. It's going to slow down your thinking. It slows down your organs. Everything slows down. It's called a CNS, what is it called? A CNS, blanking, CNS depressant. So that means that everything slows down. My organs slow down, my thinking slows down, and also I'm less inhibited, meaning that I'm not going to control my impulses as easily. I'm going to say something inappropriate more likely. That's what that is. I'm more likely to be aggressive. So if I'm at 0.2 and I'm an infrequent drinker, well, anywhere between, okay, if I'm an infrequent drinker and I'm at 0.1 to 0.19, I've got slurred speech, severely ataxic, totally mood instability, drowsy, nausea, vomiting, staggering. So that's not really, I feel that BAL is I prefer the 0.08, wouldn't you? Because even at 0.08, you're, more talkative, moderately impaired, that kind of thing. If you are a frequent drinker, though, look what happens. I could be all the way here and just be kind of at 0.1, 0.19 and be where the infrequent drinker is drinking a lot. So it also depends on your, what do you call it, tolerance. One thing I will tell you is alcohol can kill you. If you go into, you can go into a coma and death. And they say that it is very dangerous for people to pass out when they're drinking because your respiration, right, can go slow down and people can actually die. So it's not a great idea to use alcohol and pass out because you can die. So let's talk a little bit about the studies that are done by the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. Every year, the NIAAA oh, I heard about that guy. Such an idiot. Well, this is timely. Like, it's sad for him, it's sad for the guy he killed, and it's sad that he was actually, like, driving around like that. You know what I mean? Terrible. You know, and it really bugs me. Like, I'm sorry, but I don't like those guys from Jackass. I think they're all a bunch of idiots. Do you guys like them? Like, I never found them interesting. I couldn't even watch them because I think they're so stupid. And then, like, I would see that Bam guy on, like, remember he had that show with his girlfriend or whatever, and I just found him so unappealing and stupid. Just so lame. But anyway, so each year the NIAAA produces annual reports related to alcohol. And these reports, the goal of these reports is to provide information for people making policies, healthcare providers, and researchers. And so one is a report on alcohol use, and the other is a report on alcohol-related fatalities. We already looked at the report on alcohol use, looking at alcohol trends. Remember? We looked at this, types of beers. I just happen to still have it because I changed it. This is a study that we haven't looked at, where they look at trends in alcohol-related fatalities. So since every year since 1977, they have data that is based on motor vehicle accidents, and they look at the patterns to see if there's been less since Reagan started implementing all those laws, right? Remember he put in the seatbelt, the DUI stuff, not the seatbelt, the DUI laws. And if you look here, this is the total number of accidents, and what you'll see is that since 1982, there has been a major reduction in alcohol-related fatalities. See how that's decreased? So since he started putting these into place, the number of alcohol-related fatalities has decreased. Let's see, what was the difference? Hold on, I'm on the wrong chart. Okay, so in 1982, 55% of all alcohol-related fatalities involved drinkers with a 55%. Okay, sorry, of all fatalities were alcohol-related, but in '97 it was only 34%, and in 2000, 35%. So you see a major reduction due to the social policies. And the decline was due to, so you guys can look at this chart, MAD, which is the Mothers Against Drug Driving. Do you know what I'm talking about? That's a public interest group that were very active during this time. Reagan and his laws about drinking and driving, and MAD was able to increase public awareness. So this moral entrepreneur group increased public awareness, and Reagan was able to really put the social policies into place and reduced drinking and driving. A lot of people always ask me, what about marijuana, Dr. Shakib? Like, what is that like? And I always tell them that there are studies that show that marijuana, I drive when I'm on marijuana, I'm such a good driver. Do you ever hear that? People say that? And, you know, well, first of all, it's very difficult to get a DUI on alcohol. Why, I mean, on marijuana. Why do you think it's hard to get a DUI? Most DUIs on marijuana are people who are smoking a joint in their car while driving. Marijuana stays in your system for 3 weeks. Because it stays in your system for 3 weeks, it is very difficult to know if that person was on marijuana when driving, right? And whereas with alcohol, the alcohol in your blood has a direct correspondence to how it's affecting your driving. You know, like they can pull your blood and see like whether or not your coordination is on or off. So it's easy to detect, but with marijuana it's very difficult. So some issues associated with testing marijuana for DUI are, well, it's difficult because it stays in your system for 3 weeks. You want me to write this down? I don't think I have a slide. Okay. Oh, anybody who says they drive better drunk is psychotic. Seriously. Do you know what I mean? Okay, so the problem, drugs stay in the body for weeks, so that's for marijuana after use. 2, the elimination rate varies. So what I mean by that is that, you know, for alcohol, it eliminates at a certain rate, and then your that corresponds with the effects on your driving. So in other words, there isn't a good relationship between the marijuana in your that shows up in between the marijuana your system and the level of impairment that you would experience. Does this make sense? Another thing is, when driving, people who have pot in their system often have other drugs in their system, so it's hard to know what was marijuana, what was other drug. Okay, so let's compare pot and driving and alcohol on driving under the influence. Okay? So car tests show that that when you're driving under the impairment of a small amount of pot versus a small amount of alcohol, who do you think is going to be more impaired? Small amount of pot versus small amount of alcohol. Pot. A small amount of pot is going to bother you, make your driving worse than a small amount of alcohol. Oh, I should do a poll, huh? Damn. I gave it away. Did everybody hear? Okay. Okay, let me do a poll. Who thinks, when they compared pot smokers and alcohol users driving, who thinks they do better? Who thinks they drive better? Pot users under the influence or marijuana users under the influence? I'm sorry, alcohol users. Pot. Hold on, I'm going to do a poll. Open. Interesting. What's interesting is that, let me show you guys, Alcohol users, when they're under the influence and driving, think that they drive better because they're overconfident. Whereas marijuana users are paranoid. And marijuana users are more likely to drive super slow, super carefully, and the other drinkers are more likely to just drive really quickly and fast and, you know what I mean, overconfident. The issue is that, so there's this paranoia versus overconfidence. Marijuana users are paranoid, alcohol users are overconfident. However, what happens is if in general, uneventful driving is not so much a problem for marijuana users. If you're driving down a dirt road and you're going slow or whatever and you're puttering down, you're going to be really careful. But if a deer comes out, your reaction time is really bad. So you will get into an accident because you don't have good reaction time. Do you remember that commercial they showed? It was like a public service message with the guys like driving into a drive-thru or something and they hit a kid on the street. Do you know what I'm talking about? She was like biking, a little kid. Your reaction time is bad with marijuana, so you shouldn't be driving with it. So, you know, it's not a great idea to drive under the influence of both because they both have a negative influence on your driving. Right, so both are not safe. I'm going to not worry about this slide because you're not. Right. Quickly, there's a lot of social, what do you call it, costs related to drinking. Social costs related to drinking are that, you know, alcohol costs about $185 billion a year. A quarter of all incidents of violence, if not more, related to alcohol. Heavy drinking is related to tons of chronic diseases, and heavy drinkers are 29 times more likely to suffer from mental disorders. Sorry I'm speeding a little through, but I just, you know, I want to make sure we get through everything. We already talked about drinking on college campuses, but I want to talk about one thing. One social policy that has been, did we talk about moving drinking, about the strict laws about drinking and stuff on college campuses, like they've tried to make it like you can't drink on campus? I don't know if there's a drink, at our school you can drink at 21, I think, but a lot of college presidents view it as a big problem, and they've tried to have like, you know, drinking-free dorms and not really many places for people, alcohol-free dorms, and not to allow drinking on campus. And a lot of people have said that that is bad because it actually moves drinking to unsafe places, that a lot of people will then go to spring breaks in foreign countries like Mexico, if you've ever seen The Real World, where there's no drinking age. Is there a drinking age? It's like 18, but it's not enforced, and that it becomes a big problem. So that the college campuses, then people are going to get in their cars and they're going to drive and go and drink as opposed to doing it in the house. What's interesting about, if you look at laws about, you know how certain states have different laws where like they'll have like Sunday you can't drink in a certain state. You know those kinds of laws that they have, they're like dry laws or whatever. What studies have shown is that people will drive. If one state doesn't allow drinking on a Sunday, what do you think people do? Drive to another state. And when you drive to another state to get drunk, what's more likely to happen if you're drinking? You're more likely to drink and drive. They have shown that these laws where one state doesn't have drinking on Sunday actually increases alcohol-related fatalities because now everybody's driving to go get drinks. So that's what we call a unintended negative consequence. I know, right? But they're not going to rent a room. So who drinks more? We already kind of looked at this, I think. If you have higher SES, you're more likely to drink. That means higher socioeconomics. If you have higher education, you're more likely to drink. We know men are more likely to drink than women. Perhaps they would party more hard on Saturday, but I think they'd probably also get in their car and drive. Yeah, that's true. Men also drink more heavily than women, but we know that. Okay, I'm going to talk about tobacco, and so let me get my notes on that quickly. There's a couple significant things with relation to tobacco that I want to talk about. And we can do this quickly because it's not going to take that long. Just these are really just like important tobacco points that I wanted to mention. First of all, tobacco is a plant, and it contains chemicals with psychoactive properties. Tobacco contains nicotine is a psychoactive property of the drug, and that causes a low-key high. Tobacco can be smoked, inhaled, and it is a poison that can kill you. I don't think a lot of people realize that, but it kills via muscular and respiratory paralysis. But you'd have to smoke a bunch of it, but it can kill you. So it's like a toxin. You know how like people are worried about eating like strawberries that are sprayed or whatever, right? It's the same idea. It's not going to kill you it's going to kill you over time, and it's way more toxic than like spraying strawberries. But it basically is a vasoconstrictor, and it means that it constricts your blood vessels. By constricting your blood vessels, your heart has to pump harder, so it puts a lot of stress on your heart. It's extremely bad for you to smoke. In fact, I believe that the Center for Disease Control declared obesity as less of a health risk than as being a smoker. Like being a smoker is considered one of the worst possible health things you can do. It is just so bad for you in terms of, you're on your heart, causing strokes, causing lung cancer. It's terrible. So one thing it does is that it lowers people's hunger, which is one of the reasons why women often smoke, because they can use cigarettes instead of eating. But if you are a smoker and you want to quit smoking, if you're a female or anybody who's worried about their weight, well, one reason why people smoke after they eat is because it stops them from eating. When you're like, they just have a cigarette, like they'll have a small meal and then they'll eat. I don't know all people, but I remember that I used to do that. I would eat like a small meal and then have a cigarette. What do you mean? Oh yeah, well, nicotine is a stimulant, right? So it gets your whole system moving. It's like a cup of coffee. You know what I mean? But something like an opiate is going to slow you down. So nicotine is one of the most addictive substances. And we know that it's addictive because it has what we call a high consumption rate, meaning that it's heavily used, right? Remember that? Animal studies show that when they're put in a lab, if they're put in a little cage, once they're addicted to nicotine, they try super hard to keep eating it and eating it and eating it, and to keep re-administering it. Tar studies show that if you lower the tar in someone's cigarette, they're just going to keep inhaling harder, or just instead they're going to just smoke 2 or 3 cigarettes. And smokers who quit report having cravings for years. We talked about this. I have something up online about passive smoke. A lot of times people ask me if passive smoke is dangerous. Is there anybody who, well, let's do a pod, and let me get your opinion. You know what I mean by passive smoke? That's secondary smoke. In other words, can it cause cancer? Well, you can become tolerant to cigarettes. Twelve voters. Anybody else? I'm going to close it out. Okay. Yes, passive smoke is dangerous, and I'll tell you a study and how they know. And you should write this down. What they did was and it's also, if you want to read about it, I have it posted up on Blackboard under announcements. Basically, they did a study where they had women who were married to smokers and did not smoke, and they compared the rate of lung cancer among those women with women who were married to men who didn't smoke and the women didn't smoke. Do you see what the two groups are? Women married to non-smoking women married to smokers. I'll write it here. And it's non-smoking women married to smoking men. And they compared them to smoking, non-smoking women married to non-smoking men. Who do you think had higher rates of lung cancer? The women who are married to smoking men. So that tells me, what does that tell you? Secondhand smoke kills you. And that it's illegal to be in a car smoking with a child. It's related with asthma. It's awful. I can't stand when people smoke. As an ex-smoker, I am very, very intolerant of it because the more you smell it around you, then you want it more. You crave it more. And it's a very bad thing, and it kills people. I hate when I see people smoking next to the, what do you call it? The buildings, when they say that we're not supposed to. So, okay, here's what we're going to do. I want to make sure that I don't lose my place. So when we come back, because it's now 9:13, I think we're going to be fine for finishing this chapter. Remind me to finish the smoking section. So we stopped at the slide on premature smoking. Let me make a note before we go. So, so we stopped at the negative. We didn't go over the gender differences, so we stopped at negative effects of tobacco. Will someone else make a note of this in case I lose it? Derek, will you write it down? And maybe Joan? We stopped at the negative effects of tobacco, and we still have to do the gender thing, and then we have to go back and do the psychotherapeutic drugs. I know we'll finish now because we have Thursday. Okay, so I'm going to do, tomorrow my goal is to get your test done. And so I'm going to post your, not your test, but I'm going to write, so the test is going to be on these two chapters, right? Because you were tested on everything up until here, right? So we just have these two chapters, so I'm just going to do it on these two chapters. No, I'm just going to give it to you on these two chapters. It'll be on the legal drugs. See, one of the problems for me this semester is I didn't get to as much as I normally get to because of the, we had one day off. And then we're still short because for this class I have so much more material. I have like a chapter on crime and drugs. I have some stuff on marijuana that we didn't get to. I have some stuff on cocaine that we didn't get to. I have some stuff on policy. Like there's a lot in this thing, but whatever. We do the best we can, and hopefully we learn something. Because you could go on and on forever. But I also wanted to tell you that I want you to, tomorrow night, watch the movie Big Bucks, Big Pharma. It will be on the test, so you need to watch that. And it's up online. Very important to watch it. So that's going to be on the test. Big Bucks, Big Pharma. And this chapter. So I recommend watching that. There's no worksheet because I'm not going to have you hand it in. But what you could do is use the worksheet that's posted. Let me see if it's visible. Hang on a second. Let me just go up there and look. Okay, I'm just looking, so I want to make sure that you can see it. And I apologize that I raced through. I feel so bad, but it's stressful because usually when I'm teaching in class, I know that this chapter takes me three class periods to do. And at least, because it's so long. Hold on, let me go to Blackboard. I can't see you guys right now. I'm looking at this thing, so. So let me make sure I have this here for you. This movie is incredible. I think that you will love it, and it's so important for you to watch it. Okay, so 363. Let me make sure it's posted. Under movies. Okay. Big Bucks, Big Pharma. Yeah, it's up here.